Developed by Jaleco in the early 90s for the Mega Drive, P-47-2MD was conceived as a follow-up to P-47, the Freedom Fighter, a military-themed shoot-'em-up inspired by World War II. But its fate is somewhat unique. P-47-2MD belongs to that rare category of nearly finished games that were abruptly cancelled. At a time when Jaleco had shifted most of its efforts toward Nintendo platforms, keeping a Mega Drive project under wraps ultimately sealed its doom. Long believed lost, the game resurfaced in 2016 during the Jaleco 10 exhibition, organized by publisher City Connection. There, a nearly complete prototype was shown to the public, sparking renewed interest. And now, nearly 40 years later, P-47-2MD finally gets a second chance in a polished and completed form with help from some of the original developers. But beyond this unusual backstory, how does the game hold up today? After a brief intro setting up the mission stakes, you're greeted by a minimalist title screen and a set of options. For Jaleco's first attempt on the Mega Drive, the team opted for a visual direction that evokes classic arcade military shooters. The graphical style is undeniably old school, with sparse environments, but there's a fine level of detail both in the enemy designs and the backgrounds. The stages offer some visual variety with subtle transitions within the same level, like the shifting sky in Stage 2. That said, there are some missteps. Color saturation feels overdone, and the parallax effects, while appreciated, are a bit clunky. From a technical standpoint, the game is solid. The scrolling rarely stutters, even during busier segments. Weather effects and some enemy animations add a nice touch of life to the overall presentation. The soundtrack, however, didn't win me over. Aside from one or two tracks, Stage 2's theme being a standout, most of the compositions lack melody and inspiration. Some are even grating to the ear. Worse, the sound effects don't do their job, shots have no impact, and hits feel dull, which undermines the entire feedback loop of the gameplay. On the mechanical side, P-47-2MD leans on tried-and-true foundations. A single main shot, upgradable across 3 levels, 4 distinct sub-weapons, spread shot, missiles, bombs, and a tricky clone unit used for both offense and defense. While this system lacks depth, it shows its worth in specific situations. Bombs for ground targets, missiles for rear threats, and the clone, by far the most complex to master, for aggressive playstyles. It adds a welcome touch of strategy. Players start with 3 life points, which can be spent individually to trigger a special attack. In theory, this mechanic adds tactical flexibility. In practice, not so much. The payoff rarely justifies the cost. I found myself using it only sparingly and without much impact. Still, aside from that, I was generally satisfied with the core gameplay and would rate it a solid 8 out of 10. Level design favors open spaces over obstacle-dense layouts, but enemy variety and pacing are handled well overall. The rhythm does dip a bit too often, though. Sometimes it gets dull. Stage 4 is a clear exception. Set in a cavern with uneven terrain, it's reminiscent of the stage Hades in Thunder Force 3 and stands out for its more dynamic layout. Boss fights are a clear highlight, visually distinct and mechanically diverse. They offer fresh approaches in each encounter. That said, the difficulty curve is inconsistent, with a noticeable spike right before the final stage. You may have heard it before, the game is pretty easy on normal mode, maybe too easy. The generous health system and abundance of extra lives contribute to this. I'd strongly recommend switching to hard, if only to get the most out of the weapon system and push the game to show its teeth. With just 5 stages, P-47-2MD is over rather quickly. This likely reflects its troubled development. According to the devs, the game was made under tight deadlines with limited resources. The absence of a 2-player mode limits its replay value. Ultimately, its longevity rests on mastering the secondary weapons, especially the clone unit, which takes time and effort to use effectively. P-47-2MD isn't just a historical curiosity or a collector's item destined to gather dust. Yes, the game clearly suffered from a lack of resources, but the dedication and skill of its developers still shine through. In short, it's not a must-have, but it's definitely a pleasant surprise. Not essential, but enjoyable. And for Mega Drive fans, that's already worth something.